What's up, everyone, and welcome to Movie Emporium's Flashback Reviews, where I take movies from the past, of course, break them down and tell you what I think about them. If you like what you see, of course, hit that subscribe button. Join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next, and comment below on any video you watch, including this one. So, it's been 30 years since Dick Tracy, which is the Warren Beatty film, has been released in theaters. Once again, crazy to think about. You know, this is a movie that I grew up watching as a child. The more and more I watch it as an adult, I realized it was another film that I can't believe my parents let me watch because it is very, very violent, is very, very risque, and has a lot of weird things going on in it. And this movie is much more divisive than I realized. I asked several people what they thought of this film. Not a lot of people like this movie. It's really strange because I always thought this movie was well received. I thought Warren Beatty did a really nice job directing it. But I think it was because of the tone. I think it was the look and feel, the aesthetic of like the, painted backdrops and like the very unrealistic looking world and characters and the way they're dressed and the way they are makeup and stuff like that. I think it put off a lot of people because they were expecting, crime drama with normal crime bosses, but that's not what Dick Tracy is. If you've ever seen the Gould comic strip or anybody who's worked on Dick Tracy, it's a very strange comic. It's a very violent comic, but it invokes the 1930s, 1940s, which is where it's from. Like the gangsters and the police officers that go after the gangsters, and this one detective who has this really cool watch, and he is very good at taking down like Big Boy Caprice, Capone, and stuff like that. And it's a very interesting comic. I haven't read in so long, but I really enjoyed what I've read and what I've, looked at on the page. So when they were developing this film, they went through several iterations of what they wanted to do. Some people wanted to make it more realistic. Some people, like Warren Beatty, wanted to make it more like a pulp type movie. And it was a very interesting production. I mean, this movie had been going around the studio system and development hell for since 1980s, 1970s. Warren Beatty had been attached to direct and write and starred in this movie like several different times. They got everybody from Spielberg to Lucas to Eastwood to Martin Scorsese to Mel Gibson to Harrison Ford to work on this project, and I'm surprised this movie ever got made because it is a movie that just never seemed to want to see the light of day. There are several movies like that today where you never know if they're going to see the light of day. I go back to New Mutants. I don't think that movie's ever going to see the light of day. That movie's finished. And so when this movie was officially finally put together and greenlit, it was a movie that had a lot of stipulations behind it, with Warren Beatty himself, who's known for going over budget, for being very extravagant in his directorial endeavors. And Warren Beatty, as great of an actor and great of a director as he is known for doing stuff like Reds and Having Him Wait. He's a very, very difficult director to work for because he has very stern ways of doing things, but he's not the most approachable of directors when he's working on films. So I can kind of see why Walt Disney Studios was very apprehensive with letting him direct it, but I think what they got in the final product is a very good film, a very fun film, a very entertaining film with some minor, some issues in general. But the stipulations that Warren Beatty had was he had to stay in budget, he had to stay on time, which means he had to stay within the lot of time that they put to make this film. And if he were to go over budget, if he were to go over a lot of time, it'd be deducted from his director pay scale and the points that he would get on the back end. And it was a movie that, of course, once again went over budget, was very extravagant, and I just really enjoy this movie. I mean, I don't know what to say. I think Warren Beatty did a very competent job. I think the characters are very unique. This is a very, very unique movie. Some reason they marketed this to kids because, as someone who told me, this had a Roger Rabbit cartoon attached to it, which Roger Rabbit is a very middle teen adult type movie because there's a lot of risque / violence in that movie, which that could be seen in more of a kids movie. But when you're killing off tunes, you kind of get where you're going with that. So, but in the long run, this movie was made for $45 million, which in 1988, 89, or whenever this movie was made, is a pretty substantial budget. It was marketed with an additional $50 million. So that's like $100 million total in budget and marketing and stuff like that. And the movie was a bomb. to Disney. I don't know, $165 million worldwide. I don't know how it's a bomb, but when you look at all the costs and all the back end profits and stuff like that, it probably made like $3 million according to Disney's accounting. You know how that works. But in general, Dick Tracy is about a cop who patrols a city. It's very similar to like a New York of the 1930s. But this movie is about a character named Big Boy Caprice, who is of course played by Al Pacino, who got an Oscar nomination for this movie. And he wants to take control of the gang activity in the city, whether that be take over Lips Manless' nightclub, which is where Breathless Mahoney, who's played by Madonna, is located, or just in general, just like taking over the overall market and overall schemes of what bootlegging and what gangster life was like in the 1930s. And I'll tell you what, Al Pacino steals the show in this movie, as audacious and outrageous and over the top and goofy and, going for broke as you can get with Al Pacino. This is like the starting point of his very loud, very boisterous nature of who Al Pacino is. And I love him for it. I think he's doing some fun stuff here. I think the way he acts and treats all the gangster bosses and mafiosos. I'm not necessarily in love with how he treats Breathless Mahoney, because he smacks her around. He kind of abuses her. It's a very situation that would not work today, but I think Al Pacino is just doing some deliciously evil, over the top, goofy nature material here. And when you see him go up against the Warren Beatty Dick Tracy character, there's such great chemistry there that you really feel like the tension between the two. So when Dick Tracy goes after, Big Boy Caprice, and he puts a bug into Big Boy Caprice's where he stays and lives, to where he's taking him down, to the eventual flip flop of Big Boy Caprice getting the upper hand on Dick Tracy. It's a really well established, really well done character arc and character storyline, which I really enjoy. But the thing that sets this movie apart outside of Al Pacino and Dick Tracy is just the world itself. These mobsters and gangsters are some of the most odd looking people you've ever seen in your entire life. William Forsythe plays Flat Top, which is the second in command to Big Boy Caprice, and he has like a little flat top on his head. And there's a point where at the very beginning of this movie, we have a set of gangsters who are playing cards, and some of them have like really deformed faces, some of them have like really weird looking, like the body, one has like no neck and a face and a body. It's really like, they look like they're disfigured, like they've been through radiation poisoning or something like that. But we see Flat Top and his other gangsters and stuff like that basically take him down. That's the start of Big Boy Caprice taking down Lips Manless and stuff like that. And Lips Manless is of course played by Paul Sorvino, which you would never know if you didn't look at him through his eyes, because you can really tell who a person is through their eyes. And Lips Manless has like really big lips and stuff like that. And that's just this movie in a nutshell. It's just a really strange, really offbeat type of movie that's showing us some really weird and off looking characters. And for instance, like Dustin Hoffman is in this movie, and I'm assuming that he was in this movie because they worked well together in Ishtar, which was a terrible movie, and he plays Mumbles. And Mumbles is this guy who just mumbles, literally. Like, these characters are named after what they are and what they do, and Mumbles is the one that's always getting interrogated and always the one that's like giving information to Dick Tracy, but he never can, we never understand what he's saying. And the stenographer slash secretary to Dick Tracy is played by Kathy Bates, which is awesome because Kathy Bates was just starting her career. She had just done Misery and stuff like that. So to see her in like an early role, an early supporting role, and she's trying to figure out what Mumbles is saying, and she's like, I don't know what to do here. Like, what do I write? And I love that kind of stuff, but that's the kind of stuff we're dealing with these gangsters. And we also have, like, for instance, Mandy Patinkin, who's playing 99 Keys. And the reason he's called 99 Keys is because he's very good with the piano. And we have Breathless Mahoney, who's played by Madonna, who is very good at singing. So, the breathless stuff and like that. And I just love that about these characters and how they're named kind of after what they look like and who they are and what they do. And that was a very aesthetic approach to what these comics were like. You look at Marvel comics or DC comics, you look at the villains, and Dick Tracy's another example, and Swamp Thing and all these comics. They have really weird villain character names. I mean, Magneto and Big Boy Caprice and Flat Top and Darkseid and, Polka Dot Man and Condiment King and just all these characters, Thanos. I mean, who comes up with these names? I think somebody was on LSD or acid or some kind of drug when they came up with these character names, or they're just like they're writing stuff down when they're in their, when they're trying to figure out the character storylines and stuff like that, and they go, huh, Big Boy Caprice, that's a good name. Capone, very similar. And then we got Flat Top, and we got Mumbles, and we got Xeno Snop, and it's just like that's not a real name, but you know what I'm getting at. And that's what these gangsters are. And I love to watch their world and watch them play their roles out, and just to see how these characters act. They're real typical gangsters with real weird personalities and weird aesthetics and so on and so forth. And it's just like these characters, they're awesome to watch, but they're just so weird. And that's just another thing about this movie. I named off like some big people, big actors and actresses in this movie, but I'm going to go through a list of who exactly is in this movie, and it is shocking. It's not shocking because it is Warren Beatty, and people wanted to probably work on this with Warren Beatty because he's such a good actor. But let me go down a list of just who is in this movie on top of the main actors. So I'm going to read it off right now. And we have Charles Durning, who's played Chief Braden. We have Dick Van Dyke, which is amazing. Edo Ross, James Tolkan, RJ Armstrong, James Caan is in this movie for like 5 seconds. Catherine O'Hara is in this movie for a few minutes. Charles Fleischer is a reporter. And that's everybody that I was looking up on IMDb and Wikipedia. And I'm sure there's more that you can't see. But all these actors are in this movie, especially like somebody like James Caan, who is literally one of the head mob bosses who gets killed by a car explosion. He's in it for like 2 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever. And I have a feeling he was just kind of in it to want to be in it. Maybe he liked Dick Tracy. Maybe they were going to pay him a decent amount of money for the small part. It's just a really fascinating thing to watch. When I see somebody like James Tolkan, who I have only ever really seen in Back to the Future, I know he's been in a lot of stuff. You're like, holy crap, these guys are in this movie and they're almost unrecognizable just because of the makeup. The makeup is second to none in this movie. There is not really any other movies out there like this movie, and that is from the aesthetic of just the makeup and the clothing and stuff like that. So I gotta give credit to the makeup artist on this movie, because if you didn't know Al Pacino from his voice, you could almost not recognize Al Pacino. The only person that's really recognizable outside of Glenn Headley and Charlie Korsmo and stuff like that is Warren Beatty, because it's Warren Beatty, which is a little distracting as Dick Tracy. But I think it's just fantastic. I really do. I think that's what makes this movie just set itself apart. And it's amazing that they, like I said, they marketed this to kids because of the sexual nature of it. I mean, we have a character played by Madonna, who's the worst part about this movie, for the simple fact that her character and her motivations are just there for pure sexualization. She's a very attractive woman. This was her very large, big hit period of just being one of the best pop stars in the world. I mean, she's still considered the best pop star in the world, but this is her Justin Bieber or Ed Sheeran or Adele or Billie Eilish. This is Madonna in her prime, and I think that's why she went and did this movie. On top of that, I think she wanted to work with Warren Beatty, and the reason for that is because she worked on a scale pay, and what that means is she only made $30,000 for this movie. But it's amazing to see such a big name star, pop star, musician want to take this role, because it's very thankless. She's almost like the love triangle part of like the Glenn Headley, Tress Trueheart character and the Dick Tracy, but she never really has any focus and not really any like motivation outside of just trying to turn and twist and everything around the Big Boy Caprice, Dick Tracy world. And her reveal at the end to be the blank, which the blank is that one who's manipulating both sides, and you never see the face, but it real that's Breathless Mahoney. It was such a weird, not very well put together ending. I think you could have done like somebody else and it would have been a lot cooler, but having Madonna, it's just, they're using her because she's willing to be in this movie. She's going to give this movie a lot of credit and credibility, a lot of like people coming to see the movie. And I think that's why this movie made $101 million in the States, was just because of her and her attachment to the project. But she's just not good. She actually takes this movie from being a 9 out of 10 to like a 7 out of 10, just for that fact of how bad she really is in this movie. And it doesn't take away from Madonna in person as a musician, but her actorial abilities are not ever really that great. But I don't know. I don't know what to say. I think when she sings, she's impressive and amazing. But that's who Madonna is. I do think in A League of Their Own, I think she was pretty good, but she is very minor in that movie. She is very kind of toned down sexual wise, but that movie's more focused on a lot of better characters. And so yeah, I don't know. Like I said, the songs she's singing in the movie are awesome, but that's Steven Sondheim. I mean, that's what he was known for doing. He's a very great musician, composer. But outside of that, yeah, I don't really like Breathless Mahoney. Now on the other side of the romantic interest, we have Glenn Headley, who I love as an actress. I think she was great in Mr. Holland's Opus. I think she's just great in all these movies she works in, and she is that woman who is very much in love with Dick Tracy, and it is a little bit problematic in this day and age of being that typical type of woman. But I think she just has a very sweet nature to her. She's very forgiving of who Dick Tracy is because Dick Tracy is very important. I think when Dick Tracy does what he does, I think it does bother her, and she does, drive off to her mom's and stuff like that. But I just think overall, I think Glenn Headley is just a welcome addition to this movie. I think she and Dick Tracy have a very good chemistry together. I think they work well together, and I think her and Charlie Korsmo as pairing are also really well done and really nice, and really a good look at a mother-son relationship, even though he's an orphan and so on and so forth. Charlie Korsmo, who is the kid, who is the kind of the linchpin center point to this whole idea of Dick Tracy, kind of like reforming himself into being more of a fatherly figure and stuff like that. He's more of a workaholic, I guess you could say. And I do like Charlie Korsmo in here. I think he's a little over the top, a little kiddish in some points, but that's what he is. He's like an 8-year-old kid. And in this world of Dick Tracy, to see him with like the very 30s aesthetic clothing, to see him always hungry, to see him always in awe of Dick Tracy in this world of gangsters and violence, I think he kind of fits perfectly. He's like that kid you would see in like Newsies or something like that, where he's a very fun, very energetic child, very energetic character. Warren Beatty does a nice job with working with him to kind of give him his own, rambunctious, rebellion side, as well as having this sweet nature side, because when his moments with, Dick Tracy, his moments with Tess Trueheart, they really work well together. And it's not something you usually see in a lot of movies, especially with kids in this type of movie, is they're mostly just annoying and they don't work well. But I think Charlie Korsmo really does work well in this movie, and I think he's a lot of fun. I think to see him just like eat, he must have gotten really sick working on this movie from all the food that you see him eat in this movie. He's fun. To see him like jump on the backs of cars as they're going to like crime scenes and stuff like that is a lot of fun. So I like it, I enjoy it, but there you go. What makes this movie so totally unique outside of those characters and how they look is the aesthetic of this world. And when you watch that invokes the Dick Tracy comic strip, because when they eventually went to color, those are the colors they worked with. Dick Tracy wears all yellow, either yellow hat, he has black, suit. He has the watch, it's all brown. And then when you look at the world itself, the really kind of cool Art Deco of the 30s paintings, the fact that this was shot on sets and stuff like that, film studio sets. And then you see like, how the backgrounds looks artificial, but it looks like a very hyper realized Chicago, hyper realized New York City. The fact that they use visual effects to kind of have smokestacks still smoking in the air. They have, like, for instance, when Dick Tracy's chasing after the kid, you see the train tracks and you see the backgrounds and they look like they're painted and stuff like that. That's what makes the movie like truly kind of weird and truly odd and unique, and has a great perspective and a great look to it, because those types of things are very hard to do. It's forced perspective. If you go, which I know a lot of people have, and they probably remember before they put Galaxy's Edge in there, but they had this road in Hollywood Studios or MGM Studios at the time where you would look it down the street and it was a painting of San Francisco, but because of the forced perspective, because of the way it was if you go farther down the street, you start seeing actually the painting, but when you're far back, it really looks like it's bigger than it really is. And that's what Disney is really well known for doing, is that forced perspective. But that is what's happening here. Everything in the background is probably like 10, 12 feet tall, but when you're far enough away, it looks real. It doesn't look real, but it looks like a very big city and stuff like that. And that's what's really great about watching this movie, is watching that perspective and watching the colors and the street signs and the 30s look era of like nightclubs, and the way the city just feels like a living, breathing apparatus of a very interesting gold painting or gold comic strip. And I just really love that. And that's what this movie's main advantage is from trying to be something unique, not necessarily fully succeeding, because when you look at it from a 2020 perspective, it really does have its problems. It really is you can see the seams in the backgrounds. But when you look at it from like a 1990s perspective, when the digital age hadn't really fully come into effect, I think what they were working with and how Warren Beatty captured that comic feel, the comic strip feel, it really feels like it works. It really feels like it does its job properly. And it gives you a very strange, surreal sense, which is what I really enjoyed about what he was doing. And that's why I think Warren Beatty really kind of knocked it out of the park. I think when he was directing this movie, he had a very big passion for Charles Gould's comic strip. And he did a fantastic job with the aesthetic, his production design, as well as the art design, as well as the makeup. They just worked on a whole nother level with this movie, which is what makes it that great. But with that said, it's a movie. Like I said, it's you have to watch it to kind of understand why this movie is just so strange in its nature and whatnot. But the thing I'll leave off with is the music in this movie is very recognizable from being the fact that it's Danny Elfman. The one thing I can say about Danny Elfman is his scores are very unique and really fit the tone of this movie. You look at stuff like Batman, and look at stuff like Edward Scissorhands, stuff like that had come out at the time when he was working on this movie. And it's a very unique score. It's a very odd score. The score invokes a very Batman style feel to it, with the percussions and the guitars and the wood instruments and whatever he used in this movie. But just how, like, if you listen to it closely, you can literally tell it's a Danny Elfman score. And on top of that, they got Stephen Sondheim to do like all the songs in this movie, and he's been around forever. He did the songs for West Side Story. He did the songs for one of my favorite Broadway musicals, Sweeney Todd, The Demon Barber of Fleet Street. And to see him do songs in this, they're actually quite good. The one that won is one of the best songs in the movie. It's just a fun and enjoyable piece of material. And I think that's what Stephen Sondheim does well, is he knows how to write good, interesting songs with a lot of emotion and a lot of, heart and entertainment value and so on and so forth. So even though it's interesting to have it in a movie like this, the songs really do work. So but that's it. Like I said, it's a movie that you have to really kind of get into the mindset of what this is trying to do. A lot of people don't like it just for the simple fact of like Madonna being in it, or the aesthetic appeal to it with the backdrops and stuff like that. I've watched this movie ever since it came out. I think I actually saw it in the theater, and I just can't get enough of it. I mean, I watched it for the first time because I'm so busy watching other movies to review them in like 5 years. And I just sat and watched, and I'm like, this is an entertaining movie. It's a very strange and weird and provocative movie, but it's good. It really is. It's a fun movie. It's an entertaining movie. And it's a movie, if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend it, at least watching once, no matter if you liked it or not. So, but that's it. That's my take on, of course, Dick Tracy. Let me know in the comments below what you think of Dick Tracy if you've seen it. Like I said, it's officially 30 years old this week. I keep saying these decades and anniversaries, and it just still boggles my mind how old these movies are now. E.T. is going to be 40 years old in a couple years. Anyways, also, if you like this video, hit the like button. If you don't, hit the dislike button. The same with all my other videos. But also subscribe to Movie Emporium. That's my channel, as well as hitting the notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next. But otherwise, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out. What's up, guys? Thank you so much for checking out Movie Emporium. I really appreciate it. If you want to, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification button and the bell at the top. Find out what's coming next for Movie Emporium. Also, check out these 2 videos. They're amazing. I think they're awesome. I think you'll enjoy them too. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.